Story 1. My first college roommate came back from the bathroom with a huge roll of toilet paper. He walked to the mini fridge, got a can of spray cheese, broke off about 4 squares of toilet paper at a time, folded them into a single square, sprayed cheese into the middle, folded it like a pierogi, and ate it in one bite. I really wish I was making this up. He was really strange. Story 2. I woke up to find my roommate at his drawing desk wearing boxer shorts on his head. I didn't bring up the matter at first. The landlord was due to arrive shortly for the checks, so I finally addressed it, saying, "Dave, you've got boxer shorts on your head." To this day, I still remember him lazily turning around, boxer shorts and all, asking what I had just said. When I repeated myself, he suddenly exclaimed, "Oh no," and tore them off his head, blushing. When I asked why he had been wearing them in the first place, he explained that since he had started growing his hair out, it had begun to get into his eyes while he was drawing at his desk, and it was the only thing he had at hand to solve the problem. Dave could be quite a pain sometimes, but he had these moments that reminded me that yes, he was human after all. Story 3. I caught a roommate trying to sneak her belongings out one gym bag at a time to move out and avoid paying back rent. Her mother ended up paying after we threatened to file a court claim. Her room, which we hadn't seen in a year, was the most disgusting sight I have ever encountered. Since I was asked for more details, the room resembled a hoarding situation. All our missing dishes, cookware, and cutlery were found scattered throughout the room and under the bed alongside dried or moldy food. Used tampons were discovered in various places, including stuck to the wall. Used condoms were also present. Trash was everywhere, and moldy coffee cups were abundant. Stains of all sorts covered the walls and carpet, making it impossible to discern the original colors. There were also numerous liquor bottles due to her drinking issue. Her desk and bed, which she left behind, were so covered in garbage and filth that you couldn't even tell there was furniture underneath. I suspect she was also wiping mucus on the wall beside her bed. She would invite men she met online over for hookups, which I find insane. If a girl invited me into a room like that, I would leave immediately. Story 4. Left to go snowboarding. I got about 20 minutes down the road and realized I left my pass in my other jacket. I went back to my condo, and my roommate was in front of the television on the floor in just his boxers and a pair of goggles. He was using a Dremel tool to strip the paint off his bicycle. Paint flakes were everywhere. I asked him what he was doing, and he said, "I'm going to repaint my bike." I don't think he ever finished that project. Story 5. I had a roommate in my early 20s who got deeply involved in a pyramid scheme. He was convinced he would become a millionaire from it and just needed to sell energy drinks and protein shakes that the company had him buy in bulk. One day, I came home on break and he didn't know I was there. I heard talking from his bedroom. He was lifting weights in front of the mirror, staring at himself and shouting, "I am not a loser. I will sell these products. I will be rich. I will succeed." He was so focused that he didn't see me standing there, and I never brought it up to him. He lost all his friends and money for years because of that scheme. He eventually got out when the person who introduced him started dating his girlfriend. He's still a bit odd. Story 6. During my freshman year of college, my roommate's girlfriend woke me up around 6 a.m. She was talking in a high-pitched, cutesy voice as if she were addressing a cat. "Hey there, little guy. What are you doing here?" she said. She had that earthy, hippie vibe, so I thought there might be a mouse in the dorm or something. It was strange, but since I was already awake, I decided to get up and head to the bathroom. As I rolled over, I realized she was under the covers, talking to my sleeping roommate, just 5 feet away from me. Story 7. I once saw a housemate stick his finger into the butter, swirl it around, then dip the butter-covered finger into a bag of sugar and eat it like ice cream. Story 8. A friend of mine was renting the main floor of a 2-story house in college. There was an unusual cat lady renting the upstairs floor who had a separate entrance. She must have had agoraphobia because he never saw her leave her place. Her strange behavior was actually hilarious. She would lower her cat inside a basket out of her window to the ground in the backyard. The cat would sniff around the yard, go to the bathroom, then get back into the basket, and she would reel it back up to the second floor. None of us believed him until we saw it ourselves. He just got used to it. Story 9. I once walked into the house after work to find my former roommate perched on the arm of the couch, screeching like a pterodactyl. He didn't hear me come in, so I hid in the kitchen and observed as he occasionally hopped from chair to chair, screeching. Eventually, I couldn't hold the laughter in. I guess he forgot to take his medication for a few days and had a flare-up, but we still laugh about that to this day. Story 10. It's me. I'm the roommate. I thought I was at the house by myself. The Key and Peele skit East vs. West Bowl had just come out, and the names were hilariously catchy. Devoyne shower handle was stuck in my head. I couldn't get it out, so I just started shouting it loudly again and again. That was until I heard my roommate burst out laughing in the living room. He had been quietly reading a book for about 2 hours. I thought I was alone. Devoyne shower handle. Story 11. Masturbating when you think nobody is watching is not unusual. That's often considered the most appropriate time to engage in it. Story 12. I lived in a house by the sea last year. One of the rooms was rented out to a sailor. He would come and go after weeks at sea. He was around 70 years old, a Jehovah's Witness, and an alcoholic. He would return from the sea and get heavily intoxicated over several days, drinking red wine until he blacked out. He would urinate in a 2-liter milk jug and create an unpleasant odor when he disposed of it in the toilet or when you walked past his door. He would go on racist rants if you ever encountered him in the kitchen while he was cooking fish. Some nights, while walking down the passage, I would hear whispering and ominous gargling noises. They were frightening sounds. One night, I could hear a conversation that sounded demonic, like a deep, goblin-like voice, reminiscent of Gollum but scarier. Then I heard his voice, and he cast out the demon, calling upon Christ and other phrases. It turns out he had schizophrenia as well. I live alone now. Story 13. In college, I turned around in my seat to see one of my flatmates waving his private parts at his girlfriend seductively. She and I made eye contact, and I could tell she was trying not to laugh, with an amused expression on her face that seemed to say, "Yeah, I don't know what he's doing either. He didn't notice that I noticed." Story 14. I lived with a girl who claimed to commune with demons. One night, I suddenly woke up and heard her outside my door speaking in a deep, guttural voice and scratching at the door. I just went back to sleep because I didn't think much of it. Story 15. I caught my problematic roommate trying to drag a girl into his room by her arm. It was around 3 a.m., and I was the only sober one. His cousin, the third roommate, was a police officer and didn't even try to intervene. She was yelling at him to stop, which prompted me to leave my room. I separated them and escorted her and her friend to the door. I moved out quickly after that, and my old roommate emailed my dad, speaking negatively about me and calling me a cockblock. I ended up having to explain to my 72-year-old father what that meant. Story 16. In college, I once walked into my roommate's room, and she was humping her teddy bear. I didn't know that was a thing until I caught her, but apparently it's common according to her. Story 17. Not the weirdest thing ever, but it was the strangest thing I've seen in a shared house. A housemate had just received his harnesses from working at Heights training, so he was swinging back and forth on the back patio when I got home. He was having a great time. I laughed, grabbed some beers, and gave him a few pushes. Story 18. I allowed a friend to stay with me for a while, and my girlfriend at the time caught her in the kitchen. Story 19. Using a box for waste and covering it with sand-like material, then returning to the living room to gaze out the window for about an hour. Story 20. I overheard someone hitting on my girlfriend. He thought I was outside having a smoke, but I decided to grab a drink first and heard him say, "He'll never know." Fortunately, I also heard her say, "Yes, but I would," and I could not say I love him and do something like that. She then tried to find me to tell me something. I played dumb and heard her say that she doesn't like my roommate and that he had hit on her when I left. After that, we started spending more time at her place. Story 21. A man was sitting on the living room couch with a cat in his lap. He was petting her and saying very suggestive things in a tense and shaky voice. "Ooh, that's right. You're such a naughty one." And so on. He seemed quite agitated. I stood there, speechless, until he noticed me. "Oh, hi." Story 22. Not a huge thing, but I got up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom, and I caught her at 3 a.m. drinking the brine out of my jar of pickles. Story 23. I had a platonic female roommate for years. One time, I heard her having loud sex. It felt uncomfortable, almost like hearing a sibling. It went on for a while, so I had to put on headphones. Story 24. My 13-year-old son often plays games online with his friends, so I never questioned hearing him talking from another room. Then I overheard him and discovered he was quietly recording rap music on his phone in the style of Miles. He is not yet ready to share his work with us. We are leaving him alone and not pushing him to share it with us, but we are all fans of Miles, so we will probably like it. Story 25. I watched someone in a sleeping bag engaging in inappropriate behavior with the ground. I interrupted by coughing loudly. Story 26. First time at college. We both moved into the dorms on a Saturday. On the first day of class, I returned to the dorm to see if Frank wanted to grab lunch together. Neither of us knew anyone as we were newcomers to the area. I walked into our dorm and saw him sitting on one of the bean bags I brought, watching explicit content on the TV. Thankfully, he was fully clothed and the content was relatively tame. He said, "I went down to the pawn shop across the way to see what they had." He got up, pulled the disc out, put it back in the case, placed it along with 3 other DVDs in his top dresser drawer, and said, "They're there if you need them, dude." That was our first and last conversation about them. We lived together for 2 years after that with no complaints. He's still a good friend. It was just a really strange introduction on the 3rd day of living together. Story 27. When I was in college, I had a roommate who ended up watching adult content while I was watching anime. I didn't know because he was wearing headphones. One day, I came back from class and he had earphones in. I put on Dragon Ball Z to relive the Cell fight, and while Cell was talking, I heard clapping sounds and moaning. I paused because I was wondering if those sounds were from the TV. I thought, there's no way Goku and Cell fighting sounded like that. I turned to the side and my roommate was all red in the face, looking at me from his bed. He hadn't plugged in his earphones. He then tried to save himself by saying his friend sent him an inappropriate video and that his friend was being inconsiderate by disguising it as a funny video. He then showed me the video, laughing and trying to play it off as a prank. Anime was never the same in my dorm room for those last 2 months. Story 28. I walked in on my old roommate using cocaine and clutching his chest. I asked what was wrong. He said, "I don't know, my chest just hurts for some reason." I explained to him that cocaine is harmful to the heart. He was absolutely baffled by that. Other than that, I have always been the unusual roommate, hands down. Story 29. I once caught my roommate with her boyfriend behind the open refrigerator door while I was in the living room with a guest. He saw it before I did and was so disgusted he left and never contacted me again. This girl and her partner were quite unusual. She randomly told me one day how much they loved having sweaty post-gym intimacy. They also walked around the apartment naked all the time. I often came home and saw a brown streak moving across the apartment. Story 30. I was the only girl in a house of boys. A guy I lived with, embodying every negative stereotype of a role player, didn't know I was home. He went to the couch and inserted a DVD. I got up to start my day and noticed it was a cartoon. I asked what he was watching and he said it was an animated series. I had already seen the exaggerated features typical in animation. He was planning to engage in inappropriate behavior on our shared couch. So, I grabbed my cereal, sat next to him and said, "I've never seen an animated series. What is this one about?" He mumbled something, took the DVD out, and went back to his room. Story 31. Straining a pot of boiled noodles directly onto the kitchen floor, and then soaking up the water with a hot pad was quite a mess. He was on crutches at the time and acted foolishly. Story 32. I caught my roommate talking to a potted plant for 20 minutes while watering it, calling it Mr. Green's. Story 33. I do not know about walking in on someone else, but I thought my roommate was gone for the week on a trip, since they left for the airport a couple of hours earlier. I had a date that night with a really cute girl, and I was getting ready. At a certain point, after I got out of the shower, Give Me Everything by Pitbull and Neo was playing, and I was singing and dancing all over the house in my underwear. With my brush in hand, pretending it was a microphone, I was shaking my hips like Shakira, getting into it when my roommate walked in. He missed his flight and rescheduled for the next day, and I missed his calls since I had my phone face down. He told me he would pretend he didn't see anything. Good guy. Story 34. My best friend and I lived together for a year, essentially spending the entire time inebriated. One night, I came home and the place smelled strongly of marijuana, and the lights were all off. I noticed his door was closed, but I could see orange flickering lights coming from beneath it. I knocked and slowly opened the door to reveal 100 tiny lit candles scattered across his large desk, arranged in a long rectangle. He was standing above them, holding a video camera. "What are you doing?" I asked. "I'm making art. This is going to be the best short film ever." He replied. "What's it called?" "Candles." Story 35. Watching Charlie Brown Christmas with the leftover time he had with a friend was a hilarious experience in my 20s. However, in my 30s, I grew tired of people I cared about questioning why I spent time with him. He also began denying the Holocaust unexpectedly. Story 36. My college roommate's girlfriend was in our room waiting for him. She was sitting on his bed snacking on something. I mostly ignored her. Eventually, we had some interaction and she got up. I noticed she was snacking on a giant jar of fruit-flavored antacids. She had eaten all of them. I asked if she had, and she first denied it but then admitted it. I said, "You know that's going to mess up your stomach, right?" She looked confused. I explained, "That's not candy. It's for stomach issues." She replied with a dull stare, "I know, but they're good." I thought, enjoy dealing with that calcium brick in a few days. Story 37. My roommate absolutely hated the other roommate's cat. There was a strange power dynamic between the two. The male cat clearly felt like this roommate had invaded its territory and did not like it. The cat would seize any opportunity to show its distaste for the roommate, including peeing on his belongings or pooping on his bed. I really felt bad because he was honestly the nicest and most patient person you would ever meet, or so I thought. One day, I returned home from work early and sat down on the couch, swiping through social media and news on my phone, quietly observing. I doubt he even realized I had come in. The layout of the apartment was such that from the couch, there was a television and media center on the left, and on the right, a long hallway leading to 2 bedrooms occupied by the other 2 roommates. It's important to note that from the couch, I could see part of the hallway, but if you were in the hallway, you probably wouldn't notice someone sitting on the couch. I saw the cat sitting in the hallway, licking its paws and minding its own business. Suddenly, I heard a bedroom door open and partially saw my roommate emerge from his room and glare at the cat. Without warning, I saw him turn around, pull down his pants, and the most horrifying thing I have ever witnessed happened. He defecated on the cat. Mind you, this was not a typical bowel movement. It was like when you've had Mexican food and desperately need to go, and it suddenly explodes out in liquid form. I kid you not, this was the only time I have ever felt a sudden urge to vomit from witnessing something. The shocking sound of a mixture of gas and liquid hitting both the cat and the floor, luckily tile, was the most disgusting and unholy thing I have ever seen in my life. As soon as the cat was hit, it whipped around, dashed past the roommate, and ran into the other bedroom, where its owner was. The roommate then quickly headed to the bathroom immediately opposite his bedroom, presumably to clean himself up. He came out, walked toward the kitchen to gather supplies for cleanup, and saw me. He didn't say a word. He just gathered some paper towels and cleaning supplies and proceeded to clean up the hallway, the other roommate's bedroom, again, luckily tile, and the cat, of course. I was so shocked that I never mentioned the incident to either of them, and the cat's owner never realized what had happened. I moved out 6 months later for unrelated reasons, And the shitter never did anything crazy aside from that. He was actually the perfect roommate for the remainder of the time I was there. To his credit, after this incident, the cat avoided him and his room. The owner even commented on how he was glad the cat was finally listening to him and leaving this nice guy alone. In summary, my roommate grew tired of the cat disrespecting him and decided to teach it a lesson in an extreme way. That day, the cat learned a valuable lesson about pushing a nice person too far. Story 38. My bedroom door opens to the hallway, and I can see everyone going up and down that space. I was relaxing one night with the door ajar, hanging off my bed and scrolling through my phone. My main light was off, but I had a dim lamp on. I saw my roommate slowly stroll out of her room and pull her pants down to admire, I assume, her pubic hair in front of a mirror we had in the hallway. Then she drew her pajamas down to her knees, sat on the floor in the hallway, and started plucking away. I loudly said, "Oh yeah? Nice down there? Yoo-hoo." And we both laughed for a while. I'm sure this isn't the weirdest thing out there, but it caught both of us by surprise. For her, because I called out to her from my room, and for me, because I had never seen someone come out of a room so calmly to do that. Story 39. One of my good friends roomed with me right before COVID-19. I'm not an emotional person, but when we lived together, I was going through some relationship issues, and I did cry with him a few times. He believes that men shouldn't have feelings, especially express them. One night, I got home a lot earlier than usual, and before I reached the door, I heard him crying. I peeked in a window, and he was holding a stuffed animal his mom gave him, just rocking back and forth and crying. I never told him I saw him. I waited in my car for half an hour and then came in, and he was watching TV. It was nice to see he had a heart and needed to cry sometimes, too. Story 40. I walked into our apartment and saw him naked, one foot on the sink, while pouring peroxide over himself. First, I was in complete shock. Later, he explained that the girl he brought over a few nights ago from the bar gave him this injury. I laughed and suggested he see a doctor and keep the peroxide. I can't imagine the pain and discomfort. It's bad enough pouring peroxide over a small cut on a finger, but this was insane. I moved out shortly after, as we were too incompatible and had too many other strange incidents for my liking. Story 41. I don't have a roommate, but I have parents. I heard my mom in the kitchen as if she were on a cooking show. You want to dice the onion finely and cook that at 350 degrees for about 25 minutes or until the temperature reaches 165 degrees. She was not recording anything or talking to anyone, just cooking. She looked up when she saw me and said, "What?" As if it were normal. Nothing. Story 42. Before COVID-19, I lived with a coworker from a completely different team. Working from home was allowed if necessary, but we usually preferred going into the office. I would typically arrive by 9 a.m., walking to work, while my housemate would come closer to 10 a.m. I often left before he even woke up, so I never knew if he planned to work from home. I used to jog a few times a week during my lunch break. Sometimes I would forget my lunch, so I would jog home to pick it up and then catch the tram back to the office. One time, when I came home during my lunch break, I found a whole set of adult toys laid out on a towel on the kitchen counter. Thankfully, he wasn't home, which I assumed meant he was out grabbing lunch. I never told him what I saw. Story 43. He enjoys playing with these stuffed toy mice. I don't think he realizes that I am the one who moves them around. He actually believes they move by themselves. Story 44. Preparing to commit suicide was a difficult experience. Fortunately, I stopped it from happening that night. It was quite a challenging situation overall. Story 45. My boyfriend and I allowed one of his friends to stay at our house after he was kicked out by his previous roommates, as we felt sympathetic. One morning, while my boyfriend was getting ready for work, he went outside to start his car and noticed something unusual in the backyard. He turned to see his friend squatting in the grass where the dogs relieved themselves. He was defecating in our yard. Story 46. I had a great roommate 15 years ago. I caught him with a large dildo while he was lying on a blanket on the couch watching adult content, thinking I wouldn't be home. Thank goodness for the blanket. I laughed it off and reassured him not to worry since he used his own blanket and didn't get lubricant on the couch. I definitely checked the couch afterward, though. He was deeply apologetic and very embarrassed. In my mind, there was no reason to make him feel bad since he was a great roommate. We lived in that same place together for 2 more years. Story 47. After my divorce, I moved in with an old friend from school and his wife, who I had worked with. I never had any issues, but they had an open marriage, so sometimes I would come home to find someone else with either of them. One night, I was working late and feeling very tired. The door was unlocked, which was unusual, so I walked in to find a completely naked man and the wife, who was blindfolded. The awkward moment of us staring at each other for 15 seconds was unforgettable. I never brought it up. I just went to my room and turned up my headphones. The best part was that the man came into my workplace a few months later, and we had a hard time not laughing. Story 48. I came home early from work, and my roommate was having sex with a blow-up doll. This was in 1994, and the blow-up doll looked exactly like those in rated R teen movies. Story 49. I was waking up and froze, hearing my roommate's girlfriend being affectionate with him for about 15 minutes straight. This was all happening just 6 feet away, as we shared a room. I don't think they knew I was awake. Story 50. Bobby, you still scare me. 30 years ago, I opened the bathroom door, and Bobby was leaning over, staring into the mirror, shaking his fists, and growling threats about the beating he was about to give someone. For context, he had been bullied mercilessly at work for no reason. He kept to himself and was very kind. Many of his coworkers were teenagers in their late teens and early 20s. They made sport of him whenever they could. This is how school shootings happen. Anyway, I quietly pushed the door back and never mentioned it. Story 51. I went to wake up my roommate to get ready for class. I opened the door to her room, and she had fallen asleep. It happened 15 years ago, and she still doesn't know. Story 52. I am the roommate who enjoys taking long showers. They were certain I was masturbating, but I simply like warm water on my shoulders. Story 53. I caught my roommate listening to intense music and pretending he was tough. I must admit it was pretty cool. Story 54. I walked in on my roommate aggressively engaging in an inappropriate act in our dorm room while fully nude and watching animated adult content. Does that count? Story 55. In 2010 to 2011, I came home early from class because my last class was canceled. I found my unusual roommate doing naked yoga and Tai Chi in the middle of our kitchen with the windows wide open. Story 56. Once, I had a roommate who saved every dirty utensil she used for her food in a plastic bag under her bed. The rest of us discovered this months after switching to plastic utensils, as we were sure the original utensils would show up somehow. Oh, they showed up, and that's a whole story too. Story 57. I came home from work early one day and planned to ask my roommate if she wanted to run some errands with me. I opened the door to her room, and she was humping a pillow on her bed with towels spread out underneath her. She had a water bottle on a string taped to the ceiling above her, with a hole in the cap, letting the water drip onto her face as she arched her back and looked up. I think we can all guess what her kink was. I quickly shut the door and we never talked about it. Story 58. Same female roommate, same scenario twice. She didn't know I was home and in my bedroom. First, she started talking to the dog. Normally, this wouldn't be a big deal, but she said, "Hello, Mr. Dog." The dog barked in response, and they went back and forth for a solid 10 minutes. Then, she started talking to the salt and pepper shakers, engaging in a full conversation. "Oh, hello, Mr. Pepper. How are you today?" She continued. "Wonderful. That is good to hear. I hope to say the same." She added, "Ah yes, that is right, Mr. Pepper. And how is your wife, Mrs. Saltshaker?" Story 59. I walked in on my roommate sitting on my bed, taking pictures of my belongings. We later found out she had a blog about us, my other roommate and me. She gave us nicknames, made fun of us, and posted pictures of our belongings. It was very mean and quite strange. Story 60. Not so much weird but memorable and scarring, to be honest. I had a summer job on a college campus where they provided a dorm room with a roommate. I already had an off-campus apartment, so I usually just stayed there. I told my roommate, and he definitely didn't mind. I informed him that I would let him know beforehand if I was staying in the room out of courtesy. One night, I came by to sleep in the room and clearly disrupted his routine. When I walked in, I interrupted his private moment in bed with his laptop open. This was before smartphones became popular. After I entered, he looked frustrated for a second, then went to the bathroom that each dorm room had. This is when I heard him for a moment, followed by a big sigh and a flush a few seconds later. Story 61. He laid a chair on its side with the seat and back against the wall. He got on all fours while naked and proceeded to back up until he was engaging with the chair leg. Story 62. I came home from a trip early and walked in the front door. My roommates, a couple, had dragged their mattress and bedding to the middle of the living room and were naked, enjoying an experience under the influence of ecstasy. I felt bad interrupting them. They quickly tried to cover up and apologized. But to this day, I still feel like I'm the one who is guilty. Story 63. My roommate eats dinner in the dark. It scares me when I go into the kitchen, flip on the lights, and see someone already there. We call it dark dinner. Story 64. My roommate once offered me heroin, claiming it was cocaine. He wanted someone else in the house to try it so he could have a companion for buying drugs. It's amazing what one tolerates for inexpensive rent. Story 65. One time I came home from work to find my roommate's car parked diagonally, still running in the driveway. The front door was wide open and his jacket lay a few feet away from the door with his shoes kicked off, one a few feet from the jacket and the other a few feet from the first. I called out to see if he was okay, and as it turned out, he had gone out for teppanyaki and had very narrowly avoided an embarrassing situation. It was a very funny moment. Story 66. My college dorm was connected to another room with a bathroom in the middle. 2 people per room, so the 4 of us shared a bathroom. The 2 guys in the other room weren't computer savvy, but my roommate was, so he helped them set up their computers to connect to the internet, which was before everything was plug and play. I knew just enough to do it myself. Afterward, my seemingly innocent roommate, who had probably never done anything mean, looked at me and said, "I set it up so I could access their computers anytime, just in case we want to prank them or something." I was shocked, but as a prankster myself, I was very impressed. One of the guys had a girlfriend. When they were alone in his room, my roommate would send explicit content to his printer. Then we would hear him trying to explain what happened to his girlfriend. But that's besides the point. The other guy was quite peculiar and really antisocial. He went home every weekend. When I asked him why, he told me his mom recorded Dragon Ball Z for him, so he went home to watch it. At one point, my roommate decided he wanted to see what that guy had been viewing online. It was a big mistake. I'm not normally one to shame someone's preferences, but this guy was into animated adult content, quite a lot of it. His routine was to start watching it right when his roommate left for class. Also, one day I walked into our shared bathroom and found a mess sitting on the bath mat. I was disgusted because that is just gross. I know it wasn't mine, and I doubt it was my roommate's because it was his bath mat. The guy with the girlfriend was out of town at the time, which left cartoon guy. He quietly went to the bathroom and cleaned it up. I still don't understand what happened. Story 67. Serenading the refrigerator. Not really, though that is what it looked like. He played the guitar frequently. He would wander around the house playing his guitar. If he got hungry, he would open the refrigerator door and then stand back and play to it while he decided what to eat. Story 68. I was making quesadillas for all 3 of us when my college roommate caught me using his brand new serrated knife to slice cheese. I was sternly lectured that serrated knives were not to be used for cutting cheese since it would dull them. Since it was his knife and he just bought it, I let it go. Honestly, I figured I'd bring it up over beer when we were hanging out with the rest of the engineering guys, and it would be a fun roast. A day later, I was walking along the front of the triplex, and I could hear through the kitchen window, clear as day, "Don't tell Outlander I did this." I walked in, and he was cutting off the top 18 inches of the broomstick with his new knife. He looked at me. I looked at him. I dumped my rucksack in the chair, turned around, and walked back out. I've been roasting him over that for decades. Story 69. I lived in a difficult rental house where each room was rented out and there were 6 rooms. It was full of questionable characters, including us, if we are being honest. An older man, probably in his 40s or 50s, was apparently addicted to opiates. This was around the year 2000 when methamphetamine was very popular, so I didn't know what I was looking at. Our kitchen had a large interior window so people in the living room could see whoever was standing at the stove. He was falling asleep while cooking. He stood with a spatula over a pan, and his body would slowly drop and sag, then jerk half awake. This went on for what felt like a long time. Eventually, there were 4 of us, all staring at him from only a few feet away, and he never noticed us. He just kept nodding off over the stove. Story 70. I was the roommate in this case, living with my now ex and another guy. My old roommate walked out of his room to go to work and found me in a black and red corset and pirate hat, listening to sea shanties while I did the dishes. First, his reaction was confusion, but then he thought about it and realized he needed to find a woman like that. Story 71. Not a roommate, but a middle school student. He would discreetly reach into his pants and eat the smegma off his fingernails. I noticed, but other students didn't. I only saw him do it once during class. Story 72. I made cookies and placed them on a cooling rack. The kitchen was completely open to the living room, where I was sitting on the couch. My roommate stacked about 6 cookies on her hand, then hid them behind her arm and casually walked past me. She could have simply asked for cookies. Story 73. He was listening to classical music very loudly and pretending to conduct the orchestra. I'm sure he would have been famous had it been a real orchestra. Story 74. My former flatmate had meditation training somewhere in Asia. I don't recall where. Part of his meditation technique involved making very low-pitched guttural sounds. It scared me when I heard it for the first time one night. He was also deeply spiritual and seemed to prey on lost souls at his alternative meditation hangout. Every few days, he would be with another sad girl with dreadlocks, mental health issues, and face tattoos under false emotional pretenses. More than once, I had to shush them out in the morning because he had left for a few days without telling them, not wanting to have the uncomfortable conversation that it had been a one-night stand. What a creep. Story 75. My roommate once woke me up screaming in bed with mess all over their back. My roommate at the time was my small child. I'm not sure if that's relevant. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.